Welcome everybody to Chatter. This is a very special live edition of Wonderland Books. And I'm very happy to see these guys and Carter, who I never see in person. I only see on Zoom these days. We're going to talk in a little bit with Scott Price, S.L. Price, about this really, really good book. It's called The American Game, History and Hope in the Country of Lacrosse. And if you don't like lacrosse, it doesn't matter, because it is about so many things. This is Scott's particular genius. He writes about something, it is ostensibly about aardvarks, and then you realize, no, it's about these great societal changes, of which aardvarks are just one piece. And this has been a work in progress for quite some time. We're going to talk to him in just a minute. For those of you who know the DMV, the millions of you listening, I'm looking out in the street and I see my daughter. Why is she standing out in the street? Those of you who know the DMV, Bethesda is this hip, happening, hot place these days. You can't get parking. No. You can get great bars, great restaurants, great stores, great apartments now.
Plenty of parking in the parking garage.
Okay, go straight to the parking
I
garage.
hope that's a good thing. Park easily.
David got rock star parking.
No, I just got here early, that's all.
2 o'clock this afternoon. And a really good sign of how hot and happening Bethesda is that Wonderland Books is here now as of December. And I'm going to say right now, it's very nice to see David in person, Jamie in person, Claude Jennings, who does all the important work in person, and Gail Weisswasser, who is here with us, one of the owners. Gail, thanks for letting us show up.
Thank you for being here.
So it's been 6 months? 7 months since you opened?
7 months. Yeah.
Okay, we talked to you a couple of months because I thought you and Jamie McIntyre were close personal friends. We talked a few months ago about this before you had opened. How's it going? I have stopped by a couple of times and really couldn't get in the front door because of all the traffic in here. But how's it going?
It's going great. We've had a tremendous reception from the people in Bethesda, who have been very welcoming and very enthusiastic about our bookstore. We are selling more books than we ever expected we would. We're busier than we thought, and it's just been nothing but great ever since we opened the doors.
Nice. What are people buying?
They're buying everything. I mean, you're sitting in our children's section right now, which is very,
So
very
appropriate.
popular.
That is so appropriate. Water seeking its own level.
Children's books are very popular, this being Washington. Our history and current affairs and politics sells well. But I would say that fiction is probably our bread and butter. That's what I like the most. And we've probably devoted the most square footage in the store to fiction. And fiction sells really well. But I'm happy to say that this store is truly an all-purpose bookstore for everybody, because, you know, when I see what crosses the counter every day, it's really a huge mix of stuff. Yeah.
How do you decide what to put on your shelves and where you put them on the shelves?
Great question. So my co-owner, Amy, who's not here today, we do most of the ordering. And it's just a combination of looking at what's coming out, what we think is going to be popular. We pay a lot of attention to what our audience is asking for, what do our customers want. People always say that when you have a bookstore, you have what you think you should have in the store, and then your customers tell you what should be in the store, and then you meet in the middle. So we do a lot of that, and it's really just about pure personal curation, and we've been very fortunate that people seem to like our curation. So,
Does somebody just walk in off the street and say, "Hey, I'm trying to buy a book for my nephew or my
all the time.
cousin," and what kinds of questions do you ask them to decide what's the best recommendation?
I usually ask, when someone comes in and they say they want a book, I usually ask them what's the last book they read that they loved. Because then I have a sense of what their style is, what types of books resonate with them. If it's a kid, we ask, what do they like to do? Are they interested in sports? Do they like dragons? Do they like geography? What is it that kind of lights them up? And that helps us pair them with the right book.
What's the last great book you've read? The American Game by Scott Price.
I've been so lucky that the last few books I've read have all been home runs. I'm going to put in a plug for a book called The Correspondent, which is an epistolary novel. It's actually a woman living in Arnold, Maryland, of all places.
Wow.
And it's all told through letters, and it's just the most beautiful, poignant book. The author kind of teases out this story through letters that this woman writes to all different people in her life. And it was just a great read. One of those that you kind of slow down at the end because you just don't want it to end. You slow down how fast you're reading it.
Can I just say that the reason that Torie thought that we were best friends is I saw an announcement that the bookstore was opening, and knowing Torie's love for local bookstores, I immediately passed it on to her. I said, "Hey, Torie, there's this new bookstore in Bethesda. We should do something with them." And so she immediately, because this is Washington, thought we must have been connected in some way, and I was just shilling for you. But the fact is, I love bookstores. I just, if my wife were to go shopping and just say, you could just hang out in the bookstore for a while, that would be nirvana.
Right.
Because, and my wife and I, by the way, we're in the process of redecorating our living room, and we're trying to evoke a bookstore ethos, because we have so many books that we've collected, and we need more bookshelves, as everybody does who has books. And the idea that you're sitting somewhere, or you're somewhere where you're just surrounded by books on a shelf, even though you can't read them all,
Right.
there's just something really comforting about that. And so, and now that we've met, we are best friends, right?
Yeah.
Best friend.
Yeah.
Is your house going
for 2 minutes?
Is your house going to look like a bookstore?
It is. We're gonna have like little nooks where you can.
There you go.
And if it goes well enough, we'll put a checkout.
And don't you have a cat? You could have a nice cat. Bookstores
We have a
often
cat.
have a cat.
Yeah, cat,
The
have a
cat
cat.
can just lounge nicely.
And if people came and if we got them to take a book when they left, we might actually be able to fit all of our books on the shelf. We have stacks of books everywhere in our house.
David, love for bookstores? Local independent
Of
bookstores.
course. I have my question is very parochial, because that's how I roll. If I were to buy a book for your husband, who is my boss, she's pointing at people. If I had to buy a book for your husband, who is my boss at the Athletic, what should I buy him?
Oh, that's my co-owner.
Okay.
That's my co-owner. So I don't have a husband at the Athletic.
Oh.
That's
But you
Amy.
know somebody who does.
I do. Right. So what would be the book to get?
Yes.
Well, this one, of course.
Besides that one. Non-sports division.
Non-sports. There's a book that I recommend to everybody called The Art Thief. Has anyone heard of The Art
Oh,
Thief?
yeah. Excellent
Yes.
That's an excellent book. So
Yeah.
The Art Thief it reads like fiction, but it is actually a true story of the most prolific art thief in history. A guy in Europe who went to a lot of the kind of lesser known museums and lifted something like $30 million worth of art. Maybe it's more than that, billions of dollars worth of art. And he just put them in his house. He didn't sell it. He lived in his mother's house in a room like up in the attic, and she claimed she had no idea what was going on. And he just wanted to look at it. It's just a fascinating story. So he's going to get caught, because obviously they've written the book, but how he gets away with it and how he ultimately gets caught is just a fantastic book.
That's a good one. Last time I was here, we talked about James.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fabulous book. After you buy and read Scott's book, The American Game, if you haven't read James, read it. And if you have time, listen to it as well.
Yes.
This is a great listen book, too. I realize that's called audio, but I call them listen books. This is a fabulous one, too. Okay, Gail, last question. Knowing everything you know now, what would you do differently, if anything, with the store?
I actually wish our store were bigger.
That's a good wish to have.
Yeah, I mean, at the time we were like, how are we going to fill 2,000 square feet? And now we're so jammed. I mean, you look around, there's every possible square inch is filled with books.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we had a bigger store, but we've got a 10-year lease here, so I don't think it's going to change anytime soon.
You never know. Okay, Gail, thank you very, very much for letting us be
Thank
here.
you
It's
for
really,
doing
really
this.
fun to see people in person.
Yes.
Now, because we're tight on space,
Yes, I'm going to
you're going to slide to the right.
Yes.
Scott's going to sit down. And we're going to chat with Scott a little bit, but also if you have questions, interrupt us. We'll try to save some time at the end. Welcome, Scott.
So I just want you to know that it's the summer of Jaws.
Yes.
And when I heard
50
that
years.
we were all going to be at a tiny table like this, I thought we're going to need a bigger boat. So here it is, right here. So,
Very much so.
And my thought was, am I supposed to call you SL?
no, absolutely not.
Just Scott. Okay, I want to read something, and we should probably stop at this. Of Scott Price's work, the New York Times said, quote, "The seasoned reporter is a master of the new journalism developed by Hunter Thompson, Gay Talese, and Price's personal paragon, Pete Hamill. Whenever he writes about sports or about the craft of writing, he hits it over the fence." How do you live after that? That's just it. You should just quit.
Yeah, that was it.
That's as good as it is ever going to get.
That was silly. It's the only time my book was reviewed in the New York Times Sunday book section. Yeah, and it was bizarre, because it was the least. It was the least of my selling books, and it was published by a tiny publisher. This is a big, and for some reason that was the one that got in.
There you go. And then Stefan Fatsis, who has been on this show many years ago. Stefan was when we taped the show live in Calvert-Woodley liquor store on Connecticut Avenue. And it was a week or so before Thanksgiving, as I remember.
That would have been before the pandemic.
It was before the pandemic, and the store was very crowded because it was a week or so before Thanksgiving. And they had us squeezed into a tiny little table right by the shelves where the minis are. You know, the little, my daughter Devin's here. Nips, Deb? Thank you, Nips. And let me just put it, and I said the people who were significantly older than any of us at this table were very angry that we were blocking their access to the nips. But Stefan was on the show then with a great book. And he has a wonderful one. I'd pay to read a grocery list if Scott Price wrote it. That's pretty high praise too.
Yeah, well, he's clearly, on strange hallucinogens or something.
Okay, so anybody who has listened to the show more than 10,000 times knows one of my all-time favorite books is called Playing Through the Whistle, which is written by Scott, ostensibly about high school, a part of Pennsylvania outside Pittsburgh, about so much more. And if you wanted to know how a lot of things started to change in this country in the 80s, 90s, precursors to a lot of what we're seeing today, you just read that book. And I love to say it's what Hillbilly Elegy wished it was. It doesn't even hold a candle.
And what's the name of it again?
Playing Through the Whistle. It's spectacular. Is there an audio version of that? Probably wasn't.
There is an audio version. Yeah,
okay.
It is. I had nothing to do with either audio version, which if you can hear my voice, you'll understand why. I can barely keep it on the mic.
This one is good. So for the last several years, I think, Scott was one of our first authors on Chatter in the restaurant Chatter on Wisconsin Avenue.
That's right.
God rest in peace, the restaurant on Chatter. Scott was the first one. I don't think he knew what he was getting himself into, but we treated you well.
You treated me great.
It was fun.
In fact, when this book was coming out, you were one of the first people I called to say, "Hey, I really want to," and just because it was such a hoot, it was such a great time. I mean, I kind of would like to have been in that, Calvert-Woodley. That I would like to have been in the wine store, but I'll take a local bookstore. Yeah,
that's pretty great. Yeah. And I have pestered you over the last several years about this book. Before we get to that, we want to revisit, because we love talking about the backstories of our authors, and we know a little bit about you. But I heard something earlier before we started taping. Your favorite job ever?
Oh yeah. Well,
because this is the way most people become world famous, successful authors.
Actually, the best job I ever had in terms of teaching me about dealing with people and the world, and probably how to be a reporter, was I was a shoe salesman for 3 years.
Please,
Putnam Shoes.
Go ahead, expand.
In Connecticut, and I was there for 3 years, and I was the assistant manager. I had a key to the store. I was 16, 17 years old, and you had to deal with. I was selling men's, women's, children's shoes, and crazy parents. I learned that the customer is not always right. Actually, my manager was that kind of manager. If somebody was abusing his employees, he didn't put up with it. But he it taught me how to understand and deal with people in all different types, and it really served me. It was a great training ground to be a journalist. It really was.
To be able to talk to lots of different kinds of people.
Yeah, and also know what I can look at people's feet and tell you what size their shoe is,
so
even
useful.
to this day.
So useful.
To this day. Yeah.
He refrained from doing that when he saw us. David, best job ever?
Oh, best job I ever had was being an usher at the National Theater.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a better job.
Yeah. Nobody's seen Cats more than I have, I promise you. Nobody.
Favorite song from Cats?
Memory, of course.
Of course. Did you wear one of those little jackets?
I wore a red jacket. I was a 42 back then.
Jamie?
Lifeguard. Clean. Got to be outside.
Yeah.
All the younger girls looked up to me. And,
Literally and
I could
figuratively.
fantasize about that. And I had a good suntan and made $1.75 an hour, so I was in Fat City.
Yeah. What did it teach you that you then used later in life?
Well, I actually organized these swimming lessons, and I realized that if you start your own business, you can make a lot more money than if you were an hourly. I made more money teaching swimming lessons in the couple of hours before the pool opened, as I did all day at the pool.
There you go. Okay. All right, Scott, how many times over the last several years have I pestered you, though, saying, how's that book going? And when is it going to be done? And there was a bike accident.
There
in there
was a
somewhere.
bike crash in the midst of that. Yeah, probably a half dozen times. Like once a year, you check in, and it was going slowly. I think was the
The
answer.
responses were always very short and not particularly nice, like not going fast.
Yeah, exactly.
No, thanks a lot, no check.
And there was, I did have a bike crash. There's a nice scar on my knee here, and tore the quad tendon in my knee. And this book was originally, I began writing it in 2018, right after the World Championships in Israel, which was a strange place for a lacrosse World Championship to be. I thought that was interesting, and I was going to build it solely around that. Then came the bike crash, which put me out of commission for 6 months, and then of course the pandemic hit. And I was very lucky that happened, because there are a lot of developments in the book with one of the main characters completely sort of became a main character that I did not expect. And it was and the pandemic sort of allowed me to do that, because they delayed the next World Championship. And then at the end of that, the Olympics and the Haudenosaunee attempts to get into the Olympics in the 2028 games became a massive issue in the game of lacrosse. And if my knee had not been shredded, and if the world had not gone to hell in the pandemic, a far less interesting book would have come out. So I was really lucky. I was really given I was given a break on that.
We say that carefully.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the inspiration for the book. John McPhee.
Well,
Sort of.
for part of the book, which was John McPhee is a very famous, if anybody doesn't know, very famous writer for the New Yorker, nonfiction god, basically. He's been writing for 60 years, I think, for the New Yorker. And in the midst of, when I was writing it, I wrote for Sports Illustrated for 26 years. And in 2010, or maybe it was 2009 or so, I was reading the New Yorker, and there was a piece by John McPhee, who is still at Princeton teaching, but he also was, I think he was the son of the lacrosse coach, and he's actually on the staff of the lacrosse team at Princeton, I think, to this day. In a piece he was writing about lacrosse in America, he mentioned very briefly that the Iroquois, as they were then called, and as we mostly know them as, the Iroquois, Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, had their own team. They were number 3 in the world, and they're the only team recognized, only indigenous people recognized by an international sports body as a nation. And I, of course, knew nothing about that, and I almost dropped the magazine, and I said, I basically went to, and that was it. That was all he had written. It was a throwaway line, and for me, that throwaway line became the longest story I'd ever written for Sports Illustrated. In 2010, I went up to upstate New York and spent weeks on this, and months really, and eventually this book, because of that just one throwaway from John McPhee.
Big Syracuse crowd here tonight. Rep Debbie, do you see the front row? Syracuse Orange. There you go. Okay, John McPhee, amazing. If you've not read anything by John, Bill Bradley wrote about Bill Bradley.
Sense of where you are. Yeah.
He wrote about the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. Really remarkable.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are, as I say all the time about Scott's work, it's ostensibly about this, but it's about so many other things, and there is and you can pick what you want to tackle first, Scott, and you guys jump in. Mm-hmm. But there is that it is a uniquely American game, probably the only. There's racism, there's sexism, the Wall Street connection, the stick itself. It never occurred to me. I'm looking at Rob and thinking about Syracuse. It never occurred to me because if you know this much about lacrosse, which is about how much I know. Native Americans, obviously, a lot of really, really good players, but their game was very different and hard to adapt to the game being played by these mostly white run teams. Well, which of those many, and Middle East, who knew the Middle East? I was going to have to dig back into the Middle East on this one.
Yeah, it was really interesting, but I found when the first time I was exposed to lacrosse beyond sort of vaguely knowing about it was that I went and covered the Duke lacrosse case in 2006 which is an infamous case. Three Duke players were accused of rape, wrongly. But it was an explosive national case that broke into CNN and MSN. You know, every network covered it. It was a national story that really invoked all issues of class and race and lacrosse. It sort of reinforced for a lot of people the caricature of the rock-headed, entitled white lacrosse player, which then immediately was sort of discredited when they were all declared innocent. And so I went down and covered that story. And while I was doing it, even though there were absolute examples of that with the Duke lacrosse case, that even though the players were innocent, there were plenty of examples of that caricature. There were exceptions to it that made me stop in my tracks and think, well, maybe the sport isn't quite exactly the character I think it is, or it is that caricature and there are other shades and elements to it that I'm not giving credit to it as an outsider. So that stuck with me. And then in 2010, I went and did the story on the Haudenosaunee and the Iroquois, who are completely on the opposite end of that spectrum. They're lower class economically. The game is a spiritual practice. The stick is of incredible importance, the wooden stick especially. You're given the stick as a baby in your cradle. You will young men are you as a male children are, and you're going to take it into your coffin with you, and on the first day you get to heaven into the sky world. You will play a lacrosse game and you will be the captain. And so
Everybody gets to be the captain.
Everybody, right? At least once in your passage through this world. But it's a spiritual practice. It's about, weirdly, believe it or not, it's more about how you play the game than winning or losing.
I want you to expand on that, and David, jump in on this. Again, it's really, I really hope the first 20 people here get free copies of Scott's book. By the way, I really hope you read it, because listening to that part and learning about that part of it is deeply spiritual to them. It really is. It isn't about winning or losing. It's about something at a higher level. Either one of you don't get to, because you didn't do sports. Either one of you dealing with athletes experience something like that, or seen something like that.
Go ahead.
The Mohican Road Swim Club does not count.
So just to be clear, can I just interject something about journalism?
Sure.
Because journalism is in disrepute these days.
Just a wee bit.
Not at this table.
One of the great things is, so I've been a journalist for almost 50 years. And one of the great things about journalism is that you hear about something that you don't know about. You find out about it, and you need to understand it in a way that you can explain it to somebody else, which means you have a much deeper understanding, because you have to really know something in order to explain it to somebody else. And then you get to do that, and you do it over and over and over again. And some of it, maybe about 20%, actually sticks to your brain, and you remember it, and which is what makes journalism such a wonderful career. So in my case, I didn't cover lacrosse, but I didn't know anything about baseball when I was growing up. I just watched it on TV, but when I was a journalist, I got assigned to cover Orioles spring training in Miami for 5 years in a row. And I learned a lot about baseball. And like anything else, once you know more about it, whether it's lacrosse or baseball, then you really begin to understand what it's all about. And so I just put a pitch out there. Journalism is not just a career that you pursue if you want to be on TV and wear makeup and look wonderful. It's really a constant learning experience that is very rewarding, even if you never become as famous as Scott or me.
But I gotta say, I've written 5 books. Each one of them is like it was going to grad school. It was somebody paying me to learn. Like in essence, and I'm one of those. As my sister is here tonight, and I'm one of those. And my kids would tell you, I'm one of those annoying people who will ask questions endlessly. My kids' friends were always like, "Oh, we got to come over to your house. Oh, your dad's going to ask all kinds of questions." And so I'm someone who loves to travel, and and I will talk to anybody and ask questions. But instead of being that weird guy at a bus station who's asking you questions, because I work for the Miami Herald or the Sacramento Bee or the Sports Illustrated, or I'm writing a book, instead of going, oh, that's weird, they're like, oh yeah, I would like to tell you, and I would like to instruct you about this. And so, people were paying me to learn, and it really is an adventure in being able to just go out and explore.
But have either of you, who've covered a lot of sports, experienced athletes or a sport in which it really isn't about winning or losing? I mean, think of the incredible people you've covered, David. Would they play those games? Would they play at that level? Would they stay in as long as they have if they weren't making boatloads of money?
All of them were.
Yeah, Michael Jordan. I would say Michael Jordan, who I covered at North Carolina. One of the remarkable thing about Michael Jordan is that he was the richest athlete in the world. And this is at a time when everybody was complaining about salaries and, oh, these baseball players are overpaid. No one ever watched Michael Jordan and put a dollar sign on his back and said, oh, he's just doing it for the money. Everybody knows that he would have tried to take out everything in his path to win for nothing. And it's that kind of competitiveness that came through, that got through the money, which is all we think about so much, that you do get the sense that it is that. Now for him, how you play the game was all in service to winning. The difference with the Haudenosaunee is they're playing to entertain the creator. That is the charge of this, and it goes back to and to heal the community. And this goes back to the first French missionaries who came upon the game in the 17th century, seeing this, and at that time it was for community healing. A game was played because someone was sick, and so it's got a whole different level. But we all come from a society that professes and teaches our children it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game, but we rarely live up to it. For the Haudenosaunee, you have to play with a clear mind. You can't be a dirty player. Now, they play as hard as you can possibly imagine. They want to win, but there's another level to this, and it's about and 6 or 7 times a year there's a medicine game that they will play for community healing, for someone who's experiencing depression, for the deer are not coming out and aren't as flush as they could be. There's the game serves a higher purpose. And just going back to the original idea, baseball was handed, baseball and football, national pastime, most popular game, given to us by the Brits. This was rounders, this was rugby, and it was then taken and this lacrosse comes out of the woods 1,000 years ago of North America. The stick comes from hickory trees felled. The ball is made of deer skin and stuffed with feathers. This is a game that reflects the indigenous experience and reflects as a metaphor. Essentially, the game was taken from the Haudenosaunee by Canadians and Americans and refined, and then they were sort of pushed to the side of this game for 100 years. And it completely tracks in almost too convenient a way the taking of the land and the lives and the genocide of the indigenous Americans, and they've come back, and it's the only place, I would argue, that in America where indigenous Americans, the Native Americans, are on the same, are not treated as, oh, they're on reservations over here. They are as equals and living and thriving with excellence with the United States and Canada, the two top powers. And there's nothing to apologize for, and it's an element of great pride for them. So to have that 1,000-year span, I understand this is a niche sport in many ways, but I think it mirrors the American experience in ways that no other sport does.
So you've kind of touched on this, but I sort of want to ask you, like, what is the big takeaway from the American, if you read this book, and I'm reminded, by the way, the old joke, because I'm a broadcast journalist, the old joke that if broadcasting was covering Moses coming down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments, they'd say, like, and he's just descended from the mountain with the 10 Commandments. The top 3 are, because we wouldn't have time for all of them. What do we get if we wade through this book?
Well, I mean, a lot of people will get a lot of different things. I mean, first of all, if you're a lacrosse person, there are things in there that you did not know. I'm a reporter, and my job is to advance the story. And I was hoping to advance it in ways that even lacrosse experts didn't know. There are elements in here that pieces of history, interviews with people, and the way they spoke about the game and their experience, pro and con, that people don't know about. I would also argue that I believe lacrosse is an important American institution. I think it's actually more important than even its most devoted adherents understand. They just on a very basic level, lacrosse wanted to get into the Olympics, and so did the Haudenosaunee for two different reasons. One, because the lacrosse World Lacrosse wanted to make money, want to grow the game. The Haudenosaunee want to get on because the other thing about them is that they started this team, the Haudenosaunee Nationals, number 3 in the world, as a vehicle for sovereignty and a way to express their independence in the world. And so they are, those two things are often at odds. I mean, essentially you have people who just want to grow the game and hold a competition, and you've got their third best team who's willing to not take part in a competition because they travel on their own passports if that passport is not recognized. So also telling you that it's not just about winning for them, it's about political representation. So because of the Olympics, and both sides want to get into the Olympics, really there are two strains in the game, the Native American and the entitled white game, and I'm breaking down in very simplified columns in that regard. But I believe that, well, certainly for the sake of the Olympics, the two twine together. And it was a very important, mutually, they did it for their own reasons, they're for selfish reasons, but in the end, they came together, and I think it provide somewhat of a template for Native American and white society, dominant society, to sort of come together and understand in a time when the boarding school situation has become a matter of great controversy, and there's a real reckoning when it comes to both in Canada and the United States. So I think that lacrosse actually can serve not just as a mirror, but as a light.
Is there one character who helps tell this story?
Yeah. Lars Tiffany is the head coach of the University of Virginia. Thank you. That's a great teed-up question.
I'm a reporter.
That was just like, wow. Lars Tiffany is the head coach of the University of Virginia. He grew up with the Haudenosaunee. He grew up the son of a restaurateur, Brad Tiffany, outside Syracuse, and right next to the Onondaga Reservation in near Syracuse. And Lars Tiffany grew up playing with the Onondaga. His dad was a Marine. So I met Lars. He's American, white American, and I met Lars in 2018 in Israel, and he was an assistant coach for the Haudenosaunee. And he told me then I'd rather be an assistant coach with the Haudenosaunee than the head coach of Team USA. These are my people. These are who I grew up with. And Lars came in, and he, at the University of Virginia, he sort of had to help clean up that program in the long tail aftermath of the George Yardley Love murder, and the excess of alcohol, not just at Virginia, but everywhere in the sport. And he then became, lastly, his father, in the early 70s, had the largest buffalo herd east of the Mississippi. And the Onondaga, meanwhile, for 1,000 years have been, prophesying the buffalo are going to come back to upstate New York. They're coming back. They have a buffalo society. It's very important. And Lars Tiffany's dad gave them 10 buffalo, and to start their own herd in the early 70s, with the provision that they'd give them back 11 in 6 years. And Brad Tiffany was a businessman. He was not, he didn't have really any great sympathy for the Haudenosaunee then. He grew to have it, and he said, "Well, I need a written contract. And the Haudenosaunee are like, we're not going to put our name. We're not signing any white man's piece of paper." And so Orrin Lyons, who went on to found the Haudenosaunee Nationals, the third best team in the world, and Jim Brown's teammate at Syracuse, All-American goalie, incredible player, and a very important indigenous activist for the last 50 years. also an artist, created this huge deerskin treaty about yay big from the floor, framed in hickory with in the early 70s with depicting pictogram of the treaty agreement, and included on that were a picture of Brad Tiffany's family, wife and Lars Tiffany, and children, and Lars was maybe 10 years old at the time. And so there's this incredible history, and then Lars suddenly in 2023, in 2022, becomes the head coach of the Haudenosaunee Nationals, and going up against the U.S. team in the 2023 World Championships. So I'm not going to tell you what happened. I'm not going to tell you what happened, but the point is that Lars, his father before he died, gave him a hickory stick. Lars and he took it with him wherever he went. It became a totem of it, and it was crafted by one of the great Onondaga stick makers, Alfie Jacques, who passed away just before those championships. And Lars has become a very eloquent spokesman for the Haudenosaunee, and embodies sort of this entwining of the game between both the sort of upper class game that we see at the University of Virginia and the native game.
This is going to sound terrible when I say this, but if you read the book, The American Game, am I saying enough, Jamie? There's a Forrest Gump-like experience in that these important things are going on in society, and the things that are happening in the game at the same time are part of those.
Yeah.
Did that surprise you when you first started work? Did you expect to be spending time in Israel, for instance? Did you expect to be talking about the Kraft family who got involved?
No, I didn't expect to be talking about the opioid crisis, which also hit the game very hard. And I didn't expect to be talking about murder. I didn't expect to be talking about drinking in college and the very strange phenomenon that lacrosse players have among the highest GPAs of any team, and at the same time, lacrosse players in the NCAA are almost, for the last 4 or 5 surveys, every 4 years there's an NCAA survey on abuse, have the highest binge drinking and pot and cocaine use of any other sport. And the reasons for that are fascinating. One of reason, there was not really a vital pro league. There is a pro league, but not one in which you're going to make millions of dollars like the NBA or any other sport. And so the strange thing about lacrosse is, and this is one of the things I learned at Duke when I did there, is that there's this entire network of connections to Wall Street. And say Yale, for example, Yale lacrosse has an incredible pipeline to Barclays, and Dartmouth and Goldman Sachs have this great thing. And then of course there's just this sprinkle all over Wall Street. More lacrosse players than any other sport died at 9/11 in 2001, because that's where when you make it in lacrosse, you end up behind a terminal somewhere.
And they knew this going in, right?
Oh yeah,
other sports you go, okay, I'm going to play at a D1 school, I'm going to go pro. Right. And in these, they're like, no, I'm going to go to Wall Street.
No, the payoff is the network, and has been. I mean, there's a move now. The PLL is a brand new league. It's been around for 4 or 5 years, and the big thing the big achievement of the PLL and the advance over any other pro league in the past is that it actually had health care. So that tells you kind of where pro lacrosse was compared to the payoff was and remains the network, and that's unlike any other sport too. There's no other sport that has both the Native American experience, Wall Street, and it was the fastest growing sport in the first quarter of the century, and much of it was powered by women. The growth of Title IX. So I had to go into the exploration of Title IX as well.
Okay, but explain how women weren't allowed to touch the sticks.
Yeah, well, that's okay. So
it takes a turn.
In the Haudenosaunee cosmology, it's interesting because sports in the Victorian idea of sports, women are not supposed to play sports because they're too delicate or they're too weak. That's why they weren't supposed to be running marathons, because it might hurt them and stuff like that. A lot of myths about that. In the Haudenosaunee cosmology, women are incredibly powerful. The clan mothers actually run the show. There are 50 chiefs in the Grand Council of Chiefs, but they're appointed by the clan mothers. And the clan mothers not only appoint them, but can, if they don't like the way they're performing as chiefs, they can yank them as well. So the clan mothers, there's a feeling that women, especially during their moon time, are so powerful that they will drain a wooden stick of its medicine. And so as a result, women were not allowed in the Haudenosaunee world to touch a wooden stick. And Lyle Thompson, who's perhaps the greatest, that his whole family, his brothers are incredible lacrosse players, first family of native lacrosse really. His mother would say, yeah, if there's a stick on the ground, we don't touch it. Me and my daughters don't touch it. And even if it's a plastic stick, is how they put it. So for a while, the clan mothers came in and shut down the women's team, the Haudenosaunee women's team, didn't want them to play for 18 years. And really the loophole that happened in the native world, and frankly, the biggest reason is because everybody saw that the women really wanted to play. But the loophole that allowed that was the creation of the man-made stick and the plastic heads and everything else. And as a result, when there's a medicine game, even to this day, it's only played by men, and it's played with wooden sticks. And but women have become a force in the game in Native America, and also, of course, Title IX has made them that's the real engine of growth in America over the last 35 years.
So you mentioned the Olympic lobbying effort.
Yeah.
I was just at the Olympics last year in France, and breakdancing was a demonstration sport.
Yep.
And everybody laughs when I say that, but there was a very serious discussion, a very serious debate and argument between people that actually were the original practitioners of the art form, who did not want the art form commercialized into a sport with points. It wasn't supposed to be something you scored for points. And I just wonder whether any of that permeated the lacrosse discussion.
Well, it's very interesting because what happened was, for the sake of the Olympics, so this is a little bit confusing. There's the classic field game when people talk about Olympics is what we think of when they see Maryland lacrosse, Hopkins lacrosse, Syracuse lacrosse, 10-on-10 on grass outside. Then there's the box game or indoor lacrosse, which was begun in the 30s, basically to fill up hockey arenas in the off season. So but the field game is a long game, and it entails there are 45 players on a Division I roster. Now it doesn't have to have that many, but that's how it is. So for the Olympics have been trying to trim down the size of the games, the amount of sports, and especially the number of athletes. They've capped it. So what lacrosse smartly did, because they desperately think that the Olympics is the way to sell the game internationally and basically give it a new platform, is create a new game called Sixes. And Sixes is on a shorter field, it's on a faster time clock, it's with only 6. The rosters are only, I think, 10 to 12 people. It's the same game for men and women, because the men and women's collegiate games are almost completely different. So I can tell you that first of all, the Haudenosaunee, for example, it's their worst discipline. I mean, it's brand new, so you understand that, and you think if they're going to send their best players, they're going to end up doing okay. But really, it does not speak to the soul of the game. And there are plenty of people and Lawrence Tiffany is one of them, in the field game, who think, this isn't real lacrosse.
So it's kind of like banana ball.
Yeah, well, almost. It's a game that's created to introduce the game, but let's get serious. We're going to play. So there's a real division within. There's all these divisions within lacrosse, as you can imagine. It's strange because in this country you don't think of us as being divided very much. But
Exactly.
there are and really real. I mean, the Haudenosaunee have a different reason, but certainly lacrosse purists in the collegiate level don't like it either, but they love being in lacrosse, being in the Olympics, and they know that it serves a purpose that they would not, there's no chance that field game, the 10-on-10 game, would have made it into the Olympics. So they were smart.
Did you ever play lacrosse?
Nope.
Any desire to?
I'm a journalist, so as you said, no, I'm a parachute guy. I fiddled with a stick in the 70s. A friend of mine and I, ran around with it and everything else. But where I grew up, there was no lacrosse. I was in Stamford, Connecticut, which is between, essentially right near New Canaan and Greenwich, which are very rich towns and do have lacrosse. Stanford was Little League, Pop Warner, Little League baseball, Pop Warner football, basketball, and pond hockey.
And I grew up around here, so for some reason I always associated lacrosse with Maryland.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Long
I guess
time.
because I had friends who actually played lacrosse for Maryland.
And Baltimore is still, in some
Yeah,
ways,
sure.
the capital.
Yeah. Johns Hopkins, how did that happen?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
44
And Johns Hopkins is all over this book. Not as much as Syracuse, but it's all over this book too.
No, 44 national championships. It's the,
Yeah, but,
it's the Yankees.
But that could be a book in and of itself, how it
That's-
became such a power. Syracuse makes sense. Johns Hopkins, you go, how'd that happen?
That's what you need, another assignment to
There you
write
go.
another book.
I need no more assignments.
Any questions, comments? If somebody has a question or comment for Scott or anybody up here, you can take them and I'll repeat them so Claude can record them as well.
Pointing.
Oh, there we go. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask something that just came up. They had to lower the, first of all, you did a beautiful job talking about your book. It was really,
Nice.
oh, thank you.
Yes. He's a good talker as well as a writer.
Yes.
For the record, the audience member has complimented Scott on describing his book.
Anyway,
Please proceed.
they can't be in the Olympics because the rosters are so large. But why on earth would you need 45 players? They can't all play in the same game, or do they?
Why would you need 45 players? They all can't play in the same game.
Well, they don't need 45 players, but so that is traditionally how it's been on campuses, and part of it is because people will walk on and everything else, and they'll use them for practice, but it's not I mean, Rob, you could probably tell me. I mean, I don't think you would probably need more than ideally 30. Really, and probably you could get away with 27, but in the end, that's just been tradition. Duke, Syracuse, all these teams have had them, and I think it's basically because of practice, and also because people love the game, and they'll come out and just want to play in practice and not ever see time in the game.
What was the hardest thing to research? Reading this, and I kept finding myself going to the notes, and I would Google stuff and look up, and I thought, wow, a lot of people wanted to talk to you.
No, it was I did 370 interviews, and David will understand this. So I left Sports Illustrated in 2020, and it's just at the time where not only were all media entities really gasping for air financially, it's at the exact same time that athletes and teams realized they didn't need the media anymore. And access became ever more important because of Google and any number of reasons. Having LeBron James in your story meant a lot more than not having it. And access really dried up. The pandemic accelerated that. But at the Olympics, it used to be a free for all, and it was fantastic. It's my understanding is that it's certainly dried up. In lacrosse, I just happened to enter this space when that was happening everywhere else, and they couldn't have been more happy to talk to me. And the most amazing thing about it was they're very people in lacrosse. They love their game. They think it's important. I think it's important, and there are those who understand that there are dark moments in this sports history that need to be talked about and need to be dealt with, and there are others who just want to sell the game and just put a smile on it. But overall, I was stunned at how open and honest people were about what the game means. They loved it so much they wanted it told straight, and and felt that these issues needed to be aired out. And it was in many ways less provincial than I kind of expected it to be, and people wanted to have that discussion.
Warts and all. Again, there were some serious things in there about sexual harassment, all sorts of things, and it seemed like they wanted to be very, very open, very careful, very.
I mean, and during this whole time, this was during in the wake of George Floyd, and even before. People were dropping the N-word in this sport in a way that you don't really hear about elsewhere. Kyle Harrison, the greatest African American player since Jim Brown, was constantly tweeting, this poop emoji. Shit has to stop. And he told me in 2023, this is still happening. You have teams, black players who are being abused. And I went down and saw Hampton, the first Division I team, and at one point I said there were 33 players in the room, and I said, how many people here, this is in 2021, have experienced racism or abuse or the N-word in the lacrosse space? And 26 of them put up their hands. And I said, well, how many of your white teammates came to your defense? And half of them did.
So if you don't know anything about soccer or football, you just think it's a bunch of people running around, for a long time, and then eventually somebody kicks the ball to the goal. Well, if you don't know anything about baseball, you're just waiting for somebody to hit a home run. What is it about lacrosse that makes it a great sport?
Well,
That we might not see right, obviously, if we
first of
all,
in many ways, it's at least in the American continent. Obviously, soccer was started over there, but it's sort of the template. It's the template for hockey. It's the template for basketball. It's all about footwork, defense, all that footwork. The first black player at Johns Hopkins, Joe Carlton, was recruited as a basketball player. He had never played lacrosse. So imagine this. This is the New York Yankees. They're winning national championships, and in his first, he was recruited to Hopkins as a basketball player, and suddenly they're like, hey, why don't you come play lacrosse? And Joe Carlton had never. And suddenly he was a starting defenseman for the national championship team. That's not going to happen in Alabama football. But lacrosse rewards an excellent athlete very fast, very very quickly. Like baseball, it takes years to sort of understand and play. I would argue the same for basketball. And obviously football. But lacrosse, if you're a good athlete, you can survive pretty quickly on a lacrosse field. They'll stick you in a defense, and you have a stick in your hand. You know how to move your feet and do proper footwork that you learned at playing basketball or soccer. You're going to be able to not only survive but pretty much thrive. And then in the off season, you'll get on the wall and get stick skills and everything else. But you don't have to be 6'8" or 7 foot. You don't have to run a 4.2 40. It's a sport that's incredibly rewarding and is universal. Weirdly enough, for its sort of elitist image, it's an incredibly democratic sport.
And when did the first Americans start playing this?
In the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was imported by Irish laborers from Canada, coming down and emigrating, and then very quickly picked up by the upper classes of who were following the lead of Queen Victoria, who'd seen it.
Knowing what you now know now, do you wish you had played?
Yeah. It would have been a cool sport. I mean, it really would have.
Senior league out there somewhere.
I was a basketball guy, so I was sort of poured myself into that. But yeah, I'm not as handsy as others. I probably wouldn't have been that good.
But the shoe experience, maybe you could. The footwork would be there.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, there's a lot of questions about injury in sports, and especially traumatic brain injury. And I'm wondering, something with a stick doesn't look too good for me.
Yeah.
So do you have any idea about real injury and
So the question is about injury in sports, traumatic brain injury, whether that's an issue.
Well, it's not really an issue in lacrosse for two reasons, especially for women, because they're two different games. There's not hitting in the women's game, and the men are wearing helmets, and there's very rarely head-on-head collisions. In fact, I would argue that lacrosse is sort of I actually expected the game to boom a little bit more during the whole concussion crisis, because I thought, here's a perfect sport for, kind of excitable people who like to make contact, but it's not quite the contact of football that's so extreme. Because, frankly, we live in a world where I just thought middle-class mothers. I did a book on Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, which was a lower-class town during the concussion crisis, and there was never any question that those kids wanted to play football. And you'd have 4 leagues of 5 to 6, 7 to 8, 9 to 10, and 10 to 12, and there was a waiting list for it because this football was seen as the way out of Aliquippa. But for people who have a choice and of sports to choose from, and it's more of a recreation than an avenue out, I thought lacrosse would actually benefit more from the concussion crisis than I think it has. I'm kind of surprised by that. But it's certainly not the damage that you're thinking of. Yeah.
And our questioner has a lovely dog at her feet. What's your dog's name? Max, welcome. It's a great thing about Wonderland Books where we are in Bethesda, Maryland, because they allow dogs, right? Yeah, love that. Okay, Scott, I don't think we did this to you the last time you were with us in Chat of the Restaurant. We have to. This is how we make our millions on Patreon. We do 60 seconds more. Are you ready?
Just 60 seconds?
We're going to ask questions, rapid
It's
fire
a
questions.
liberal
Okay?
60
Yeah, it's a
seconds.
really
We can
liberal 60
go like
seconds.
2 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not multiple
like
choice,
soccer where they add time.
All right.
That's right.
Extra time.
Which is one of the dumbest things in sports. Okay, what was your favorite childhood book?
Johnny Tremaine.
Oh, a nice one. I had that on my shelves for a long time. Okay, what's a book you wish everyone would read in addition to The American Game or Playing Through the Whistle?
Okay. One of my the USA trilogy by John Dos Passos. 1919, 42nd Parallel, and The Big Money. Norman Mailer called it the great American novel. I would argue it is the great American novel, and it's the one that almost nobody thinks about anymore when they talk about the great American novel. And I just finished a book called Parade's End by Ford Maddox Ford, which I would argue is the best, written at the same time as Ulysses and Remembrance of Things Past, Proust. It's the best modernist novel I've ever read.
Wow.
One of the top 10 novels I've ever read, and I'm happy. Reading it, I couldn't believe how great it was. I'm 63 years old. It was like, wait a minute, there's another mountain as big as Everest, and I didn't know anything about it. It's that good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Give you kind of imposter syndrome now?
I have imposter syndrome all the time.
Okay, what's your ideal writer's dinner? You can have 2 or 3 writers to have dinner with them around the corner at Caddy's, dead or alive.
Present company accepted.
Wow. Okay. I would say Mark Twain, my best friend Bruce Schoenfeld, who writes for the New York Times, and I just had it. And Virginia Woolf.
Oh, good one. She'd be the most fun one
Yeah.
at dinner. Okay.
Until she put the stones in her pockets, then we're all in trouble.
The book is The American Game. It is fabulous, and it's one of the few I hate subheads.